The X trilogy took us on a journey through time, peeling back nuanced depictions of ambition, repression, and identity in a story told across decades. From the gritty, blood soaked landscapes of 1970s Texas in X to the tragic portrayal of a young Pearl in 1918, we've seen deeply flawed characters grappling with dreams, desires, and that rush that comes with violent tendencies. Now, in Maxine, the final chapter of this story, we travel to the 1980s with Maxine Minx, the sole survivor of the Texas Grindhouse Massacre, determined to escape her past and finally claim that fame she's always believed she deserves. Set against a rapidly changing cultural landscape, Maxine explores the intersection of ambition and fame in a way that feels modern yet remains tied to the same themes that run in the veins of this trilogy. It's ultimately a story of survival, not just in a literal sense, but in Maxine's relentless quest to carve out her identity in a world where everything, people included, is disposable. This week we're diving into the final installment of this trilogy, looking at how well it ties together all of the narrative threads from the previous two films, while standing on its own as a commentary on the cost of fame and the search for meaning in a superficial world, which is a little ironic given how ultimately hollow I felt after watching this thing, but a little more on that later. And also, if you're new around here and you want to support the content I'm creating, then subscribing and leaving a like on it is going to go a long way in helping me know that what I'm producing is going in the right direction. Links to my coverage of both previous films in the X trilogy will be in the description below, and with all of the little disclaimers out of the way, let's talk about Maxine. The story resumes 6 years after the events of X and follows Maxine as she strives to break into the mainstream entertainment industry in 1985 Los Angeles. Maxine, now a prominent adult film actress, dreams of transcending her current career to achieve true stardom. The film continues to explore that look into ambition and fame, this time set against the neon-lit dark side of the entertainment industry. As Maxine pursues her ambitions, she becomes entangled in a series of brutal murders that sweep the city. The Night Stalker consistently looms over Maxine as a threat in the background, fueling this constant state of paranoia and tension until the reveal in the third act. Maxine's life becomes a suspense-filled journey as the violence around her mirrors the grim reality of Los Angeles, as well as harkening back to the trauma-filled journey to where she is now, blurring that line between her pursuit of fame and the dangers that ultimately follow it. The story takes a very dramatic twist in the third act when it's revealed that it's Maxine's estranged father who is leading a cult responsible for all of the gruesome killings. In his moral crusade against Hollywood's perceived evils and perverted corruption, he seeks to punish those within the industry, including Maxine. His warped ideology drives him and his followers to target people in Maxine's proximity, reflecting broader societal anxieties about Hollywood's influence during the era of satanic panic. The film's climax builds towards a bloody confrontation between Maxine and her father, culminating in the darkness of the Hollywood Hills. In a violent showdown, Maxine kills him, symbolically breaking free from the moral and patriarchal chains that he represents. This pivotal moment solidifies Maxine's transformation from victim to survivor, although the price of her rise to stardom will always be felt, having left a trail of bloodshed and prolonged trauma in its wake. Maxine easily blends classic slasher horror with a giallo-style whodunit narrative, using the city's bright neon aesthetic as a backdrop to explore prevalent themes of exploitation, moral corruption, and the cost of fame. Ty West's direction is bathed in 1980s stylization, incorporating both gory kills and a sharp social commentary on Hollywood's darker aspects. Maxine's arc concludes with her status as a star being secured, but the journey is amplified by the violence, moral compromise, and danger she faced along the way. The film concludes the trilogy by intertwining Maxine's rise to fame with the crumbling moral fabric of the society she navigates. As the third and final film in the trilogy, Maxine serves as a culmination of several themes that have been in steady development since X. While it set out to explore different facets of horror, from elevated slasher-adjacent thrills to psychological studies, Maxine attempts to bring it all full circle. One of the film's strongest elements is how it mirrors and contrasts the journeys of its predecessors. In X, Maxine was visibly resolute, willing to do anything to make it. Pearl showed us a similar treatment in a different era, showcasing how it consumed and destroyed her over time. Now, Maxine picks up the same thread, with her navigating an industry obsessed with sex, image, and fame, all while having a serial killer loom over her every move. The connection between Maxine and Pearl has to go down as one of this trilogy's most fascinating aspects. Both women are driven by a desire to break free from their circumstances, but where they differ is that while Pearl's ambition is stifled by societal limitations, Maxine has more opportunity, even if that said opportunity comes at a massive cost. Her path to fame isn't paved by some sort of extraordinary talent or determination alone, but rather with the exploitation and grit that defined this era of entertainment. While thematic continuity between the three films is clear, Maxine ends up struggling in some areas to balance these ideas with its common slasher aesthetic. The film introduces a more chaotic, larger-than-life energy that fits in with the setting, but occasionally feels at odds with the deeper, psychological roots established in the previous movies that continue to spread into it. The film's pacing and focus over more over-the-top set pieces tends to overshadow some of the character development that made X and Pearl so compelling. However, it still manages to highlight central messages, the cost of ambition and the dangers of seeking validation from a world that values spectacle over substance. One of Maxine's defining aspects is the setting. The city and the era are both deeply tied to notions of excess, ambition, and superficiality, making it the perfect environment for Maxine's pursuit of stardom. This choice isn't just stylistic, but also reflects the deeper thematic concerns that run throughout the trilogy. In contrast to the rural isolation that clouds X and the stifling farm life in Pearl, Maxine throws the audience directly into the chaotic heart of the entertainment industry at a time where fame and fortune were increasingly tied to image rather than talent. The 80s were defined by a culture obsessed with self-promotion, where the emergence of MTV and the rise of commercialism created a world where image was everything. The neon-soaked Los Angeles is far from the rural landscapes of her past, but the exterior hides a much darker reality of exploitation, manipulation, and moral decay, themes and issues that Maxine has become all too familiar with. The allure of the era is juxtaposed with the harsher reality, much like how X utilises the 70s adult film industry. This setting creates room for a sharp commentary on the dangers of seeking fame in a world that thrives on appearance. Maxine's desperate ambition, fueled by a desire to become more than just another face, becomes a risky game when she runs the chance of losing her identity entirely. The bright colours, synth-driven score, and the over-the-top energy don't always complement the trilogy standards, but then maybe that's the point. They heighten the film's sense of disorientation, making it really difficult for the audience and Maxine to make that distinction between fantasy and reality. By embracing this chaotic culture, Maxine explores how society shapes and often distorts the individuals within it. Maxine's struggle to stand out in an increasingly shallow industry reflects the wider themes of the trilogy, the lengths that people will go to achieve their dreams, and how those dreams can ultimately serve to destroy us. The 80s setting becomes more than just some nostalgic backdrop. It's a vital part of the story's exploration of ambition, exploitation, and the cost of fame. X and Pearl used their historical settings to ground themselves narratively in specific societal challenges. Maxine uses the hyper-real, excessive world of Los Angeles as both a critique of fame culture and a reflection of Maxine's internal struggle. She wants to be a star, but in a decade obsessed with surface-level success, achieving that dream may come at a price she's not quite ready to pay. At the heart of Maxine is the evolution of its main character, who has now fully embraced her ambition to become a movie star. Throughout the trilogy, Maxine's character arc has always been a consistent through-line, starting off as a small-town girl with big dreams in X. She was already showing signs of her fierce determination, however, in Maxine, this determination is transformed into more of a ruthless obsession. The film doesn't just show her journey towards stardom, it delves into its cost, raising questions about how much of Maxine's identity is left in the wake of her pursuit. Much of the film's tension actually comes from that internal identity struggle. Maxine's usual mantra of not accepting a life that she doesn't feel she deserves takes on a much darker tone here, showing that her drive to be seen and recognised in an industry that continuously prioritises shallow image making leads her to constantly reinvent herself, becoming more product than person. Maxine's growth through the trilogy has shown self-determination, but in this final film, it feels as though she's permanently on the edge of losing herself. The film weaves this internal conflict into the ongoing narrative, questioning whether her desire for fame is worth the price of her humanity. While X and Pearl explore ambition, sexuality, and repression, Maxine also shifts that focus onto identity. What sets Maxine apart is how it uses this character to comment on the larger theme of identity in the 80s entertainment industry. The decade was infamous for its obsession with image and branding, and Maxine's journey mirrors that cultural shift perfectly. The vibrant excess of time contrasts sharply with the internal decay that Maxine experiences as she must perform and alter herself to fit an increasingly dehumanizing mold. The exploration of fame goes far beyond the individual. It becomes a commentary on the industry's commodification of people, especially women, reducing them to mere objects of desire or spectacle. Maxine's story echoes Pearl's, with both characters driven by their desire for recognition. However, while Pearl's ambition is stifled by oppressive surroundings, Maxine faces a problem that's quite the opposite actually. Surrounded by the overstimulation of Los Angeles, a place where everyone is competing to stand out in an industry where you can be forgotten at any given time. I feel like I've given little hints throughout the video, but in case it wasn't all that obvious, I don't particularly have a whole lot of love for Maxine. I don't hate it, and to its credit, it is better on a rewatch. I wouldn't necessarily say it doesn't work, but at the same time, I feel like the tone is always consistently foggy in what is a very starry backdrop, which is honestly a little weirdly poetic. I think performances around the table are also pretty great. I think Mia Goth is fantastic yet again. I think Giancarlo Esposito does a really fun thing in a role that we don't typically get to see him play. And I think Kevin Bacon amps it up to 11 in one of the weirdest, most charismatic performances of the year. I love the set design. Yet again, West has crafted what is a very visually authentic experience. But then to counter that, the film then loses itself to the commercialization that the 80s was so prone to, with it featuring a lot of set pieces that feel as though they exist purely to satiate some need for action. The dread that this movie is able to build is consistently undone, whether it be through the chase through the Universal lot or the staggeringly missed opportunity that is the reveal of the killer in Act 3. That honestly is the underlying disappointment here. It consistently presents such great moments only to weigh them down with lackluster features. It contains so much promise, but at the same time it can't capitalise on a single ounce of it because of the amount of baggage that's here. You know, everything here should work on paper, but for whatever reason, it just never quite settles. And that sucks because this was a film that I was really anticipating. From the start of the year, this was one of my must-watches, and to see this come out and this be what I think of it, it does hurt. To be totally honest, I wasn't even fully sure I wanted to make a video on Maxine purely because of how I feel on it. Those of you that have been watching the channel for a while know that I typically don't tend to cover movies that I'm not that fond of anymore. And honestly, if not for the fact that I'm covering the trilogy, and without the inclusion of Maxine it might have felt a little bit weird, I may have never covered this film on the channel. In a weird way though, I'm glad that I have, because it's made me at least appreciate it a little more, even if I'm still not fully in love with it. Because I do think there are genuine traces of a pretty good movie in here that I'm just not picking up on, but that's not for a lack of trying, maybe just a lack of understanding. As Maxine closes out this ambitious trilogy, it marks both an ending and a new beginning. The journey from X through Pearl to Maxine has been a wild, genre-bending ride, an exploration of identity, ambition, and the cost of fame, all wrapped up in slasher violence and psychological horror. Maxine's journey across these films captures something raw about human desire, the relentless pursuit of dreams no matter the cost, and the destructive consequences of living in a world that constantly commodifies people. From X's gritty rural terror to Pearl's technicolor nightmare, Maxine brings us to the neon-soaked cutthroat world of 1980s Hollywood. It offers a fitting, albeit messy, conclusion to the trilogy's thematic exploration of what it means to chase fame in a world that's more interested in selling your image than understanding you as a person. While Maxine may be my least favourite entry into this trilogy, I have to give it respect for at least trying to push the boundaries of what a slasher can be, elevating the genre by weaving in a narrative that digs deep into the psyche of its characters, and I do genuinely respect the vision and effort put behind it. This trilogy as a whole has redefined how horror can intersect with character studies and period aesthetics, leaving a unique mark on the genre, and for that, I think it's far from ever being forgotten.